We all need a place where our hearts can breathe at. This is where broken hearts heal, courage is born, and silence finds a voice. Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
I want to take you to a moment. One that's not loud, not dramatic, but deeply haunting. I was sitting in the backseat of a friend's car, watching raindrops race down the window, and she said, almost in a whisper, "I think he knows what he did. He just can't say it out loud." It hit me like a quiet thunder. Some people live with the kind of guilt that doesn't come in breakdowns or apologies. It comes in insomnia, in short fuses, in restlessness that doesn't let them breathe. They never say, "I'm sorry," but their eyes dart like they're always trying to escape their own reflection. And today, I want to talk about the guilt that sits in the mind of a narcissist. Yes, that person who may have wounded you, gaslighted you, manipulated you, and walked away like they felt nothing. We've been conditioned to believe that guilt always shows up wearing tears, that it looks like a trembling voice, a handwritten apology, a person sitting across from you saying, "I messed up. I'm so sorry. I don't know how I could have hurt you like that." We're told that guilt is obvious, raw, open, and ready to make things right. And maybe that's true in a world where people have the emotional tools and the courage to own their actions. But in the real world, especially when we're talking about narcissists, guilt doesn't look like a clean confession. It's messier, it's quieter, it's buried. Guilt, in the narcissist's mind, often shows up as defensiveness. Sharp words, quick tempers, cold silence. It slips in as overconfidence that feels forced, like they're trying to convince themselves they're right because the truth is too painful to face. They might pretend to be unfazed. They might even laugh at the chaos they left behind. But if you look closely, if you really look, you'll start to notice the subtle signs of discomfort. The shift in their voice when someone brings up the past. The way their eyes harden when your name is mentioned. The need to constantly rewrite the narrative so they come out clean. That's guilt. It's just guilt wrapped in denial. Because here's something many people don't realize. Even narcissists have a conscience. It may be buried under years of ego, fear, and trauma, but it's still there, whispering things they try desperately not to hear. That whisper gets louder in the quiet moments, in the in-between. Late at night when the distractions fade, and the phone isn't ringing, and there's no one left to manipulate, that's when guilt begins to crawl in. It doesn't come with clarity, though. Not at first. It comes as restlessness, as irritability, as needing to control the people around them because their internal world feels so out of control. Guilt for them isn't, "I'm sorry." It's, "Why does everyone betray me?" It's, "People are too sensitive." It's, "I did what I had to do." But the truth is, they know. Somewhere deep inside they know. And that knowing eats at them. Not in a way they can admit, but in the way it shapes their moods, their relationships, their sleepless nights. So if you've ever been hurt by someone who acted like they felt nothing, you need to hear this. Just because they didn't break down in front of you doesn't mean their soul isn't carrying the weight. Just because they never said, "I'm sorry," doesn't mean your pain didn't register. Guilt is sneaky, especially in those who are too proud or too broken to face the truth head on. But make no mistake, it's there. It may not look like guilt. It may not sound like guilt. But guilt doesn't disappear just because it's denied. It just finds another way to haunt them. Imagine guilt like a slow, silent leak inside the walls of a house. From the outside, everything looks intact, freshly painted, windows cleaned, floors polished. But inside, behind the drywall and beneath the surface, the water is seeping, quietly, persistently. Day by day, it's weakening the structure. You can't see the damage right away, but eventually something cracks. Something gives. That's what it's like inside the mind of a narcissist. They've spent a lifetime building walls. Walls made of pride, defensiveness, blame, and ego. And those walls are thick. Thick enough to keep out discomfort, thick enough to avoid shame, thick enough to keep them from having to look at who they've really become. But guilt, real guilt, it doesn't need a door to get in. It finds the cracks. And once it's in, it lingers. See, narcissists are often masters of illusion. They can make you believe they feel nothing, that your absence is irrelevant, that the relationship, the friendship, the pain they caused, all of it meant very little. They move on quickly. Post pictures, change narratives. Pretend like nothing happened. But guilt doesn't care about performance. You know where it shows up. In the silence after the show ends. In the stillness when no one is clapping. In the moments when the attention fades and there's no one left to impress. Guilt creeps in when they drive past the place where you had your last argument. It rises when a certain song plays on the radio, or when someone laughs the way you used to. It sneaks in when their next relationship doesn't feel quite right. When the new person doesn't challenge them the way you did, doesn't see through them the way you could. And they'll tell themselves lies to survive it. I made the right decision. They were never grateful anyway. They were too emotional. But their body keeps the score. The tightening in their chest. The snapping at small things. The sudden waves of anger, frustration, or unexplained sadness. That's not peace. That's not indifference. That's a fortress starting to collapse. Because, especially the kind that's denied, is corrosive. It doesn't announce itself like shame. It doesn't scream like regret. It slowly wears away the parts of you that still know right from wrong. And for narcissists, it's terrifying. Because to let guilt in fully would mean facing the truth that they're not always the hero in the story. It would mean admitting that they hurt people who loved them, that they broke something sacred. And so they fight it, they bury it. They distract themselves with control, with chaos, with constant reinvention. But guilt is patient. It doesn't need to rush, it just waits. And over time, it changes them, maybe not in ways you can see from the outside. But on the inside, they start to decay. That's why so many narcissists live in cycles of destruction, loneliness, self-sabotage. Because guilt, left unacknowledged, doesn't vanish. It erodes. Here's the part that often feels the hardest to accept, especially when you're the one who was hurt, manipulated, or discarded. Just because they feel guilt doesn't mean they're ready to take responsibility. And just because guilt is eating away at them doesn't mean it's your job to make it better. This is where so many tender-hearted people get stuck. We see glimpses of their struggle, of their humanness. Maybe a cryptic post, a flicker of sadness in their voice, or a message out of nowhere that says, "Hey, just thinking about you." And suddenly, we wonder, do they finally see what they did? Do they regret it? Should I respond? Should I comfort them? But here's what you need to understand with your whole heart: their guilt is not your responsibility, and neither is their healing. You are not the one who broke them, even if they made you feel like you were. You are not their redemption story. You are not the therapist, the fixer, the emotional ambulance meant to clean up a mess they refuse to own. If they do feel guilt, and in most cases they do, deeply and secretly, it is theirs to feel, theirs to face, and theirs to work through. But narcissists don't like sitting in discomfort. So what do? They try to hand it off, and often they try to hand it to you. They might reach out and play the victim. "I never meant to hurt you. I just had so much going on." Or they'll minimize the damage. "Why are you still upset? That was ages ago." Or worse, they might say just enough to keep you emotionally hooked without ever taking true ownership. Because if they can get you to feel sorry for them, even a little, then they don't have to feel as guilty. The burden shifts from their shoulders to yours. This is emotional sleight of hand. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you, trying to rescue someone who isn't ready to change. And I get it. You're a deeply empathetic person. You want to believe in people. You want to believe that if they hurt you, it was because they were hurting too. And maybe that's true. Maybe their pain was real. But here's the line that must be drawn with steady hands. Someone's pain might explain their behavior, but it never excuses their harm. Your empathy is a gift. But when it's misplaced, when it turns into enabling, rescuing, or silencing your own needs to keep the peace, it becomes self-abandonment. Let me say this clearly: it is not cruel to let someone feel the consequences of their actions. It is not heartless to walk away. It is not unkind to let someone sit in the very feelings they tried to avoid by blaming you. Because healing, real healing, requires ownership. It requires facing the truth without flinching. And that is work only they can do. If you take that work away from them, you don't help them grow. You only prolong their delay. And you deserve freedom. Freedom from the emotional weight that was never yours. Freedom from being the emotional scapegoat. Freedom from the exhausting loop of hoping they'll finally see what they did. You deserve peace. Not the kind that comes from someone else changing, but the kind that comes from you releasing what was never yours to hold. That's where your power lives. That's where your healing begins. There's a moment in healing where we have to face a complicated truth. One that doesn't fit neatly into the categories of good or bad, right or wrong. It's the truth that even narcissists are human. And for some of us, that realization feels like a betrayal. Because how can someone be human and still cause so much pain? How can someone with a heart, with a past, with wounds of their own, treat us like we were disposable? It's easier to put them in a box, to call them a monster, a villain, a manipulator with no conscience. But life isn't black and white. People aren't made of just one story. Even narcissists have their reasons. Even narcissists bleed. Even narcissists were once children who learned that vulnerability wasn't safe. That love was conditional. That the only way to be seen was to perform, to control, to build an identity that would never be questioned. That doesn't mean they didn't hurt you. It doesn't mean they get a pass. It just means that their behavior was born out of something real, something wounded, something deeply human. But here's where we must be careful. Recognizing their humanity does not mean erasing the harm they caused. It does not mean minimizing what they did or justifying their actions because of their past. Compassion doesn't mean making yourself small. Understanding where someone came from doesn't require you to stay where they left you. And this is where boundaries become sacred. You can say, I see the pain that shaped you. You can say, I understand you weren't given the tools to love in a healthy way. You can even say, I don't hate you. I just can't have you in my life. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. That's courage. That's emotional clarity. Because the hardest truth to hold is this: people can be broken and still be dangerous. They can be hurting and still cause harm. They can feel guilt and still never change. And the most powerful thing you can do is stop waiting for them to evolve in order to begin your healing. There's a tender kind of grief that comes when you accept this. It's the grief of realizing that someone you loved was never going to be the person you hoped they'd become. That they may never apologize. That they may never look in the mirror and see the damage they've done. But there's also a quiet kind of freedom in that acceptance. Because now you don't have to chase their transformation. You don't have to put your healing on hold, waiting for them to wake up. You can grieve the version of them you needed, and then release it. You can say goodbye not just to the relationship, but to the illusion. The illusion that they were capable of the kind of love you deserved. The illusion that if you were just more patient, more kind, more forgiving, they would change. They might be human, but being human doesn't absolve them. It doesn't restore what was broken. It doesn't give them the right to hurt others unchecked. You get to protect yourself. You get to close the chapter. You get to move forward with compassion, yes, but also with self-respect. And in that choice, you reclaim something sacred: your voice, your sanity, your truth. Let them wrestle with their guilt. Let them sit with the choices they made. And let yourself walk away with your head held high, not bitter but brave, not hardened but wise, not cruel but clear. So many of us spend years, waiting for the apology that never comes. We replay the conversations in our heads, imagining how it would feel to finally hear them say it. I hurt you. I see it now. I'm so sorry. We convince ourselves that if they would just admit it, just once, then maybe we could finally move on. That maybe the wound would close. That maybe we'd feel whole again. But here's the tender, complicated truth: healing does not begin with their apology. It begins the moment you stop waiting for it. Closure is not something they give you. It's something you give yourself. Through clarity, self-compassion, and the radical courage to say, I deserved better. And I don't need their permission to move forward. It hurts. God, it hurts. To realize that someone could shatter your trust, betray your love, disrespect your boundaries, and walk away as if none of it mattered. It feels like the pain is stuck, frozen in time, waiting for that one missing puzzle piece to make sense of it all. But the longer you wait for them to acknowledge what they did, the more power you give to someone who has already taken enough. Because let's be honest, narcissists don't like closure. Closure requires accountability. It requires facing the truth they've worked so hard to avoid. It means sitting in discomfort, and most narcissists will run from that at all costs. They'd rather rewrite history, make you the villain, or pretend like nothing happened than admit they were wrong. And the longer you stay in that waiting room, the one marked, maybe one day they'll change, the longer you put your own life on hold, your joy, your peace, your healing, you deserve more than that. You deserve to stop explaining your pain to someone who refuses to understand it. You deserve to stop watering a relationship that was never meant to grow. You deserve to take all that love, all that forgiveness, all that empathy you poured into them, and give it to yourself. Let that be your closure, not their apology. Your decision to reclaim your narrative. Your decision to stop living like their silence defines your worth. Your decision to walk away, not because it doesn't hurt, but because you've learned to choose yourself in the aftermath of pain. And I want you to hear this, not just with your ears, but with your whole body. You do not need them to say sorry for your heart to heal. Healing is not a performance. It's not something you win by being patient, kind, or forgiving enough to earn their remorse. Healing is personal, it's sacred, and it begins when you look in the mirror and say, I don't need them to validate what I already know. What happened was real. What I felt was valid. And I am allowed to move on, even without the apology I deserved. This is what freedom looks like. It's quiet, it's slow, it's often lonely. But it's yours, so stop waiting, stop circling back. Stop searching their words, their posts, their sideways glances for proof that they finally get it. Maybe they don't. But either way, your healing is not theirs to grant. It's already in your hands. The most powerful closure is choosing to live well, love deeper, and let go of anything that keeps you from peace. You're not waiting anymore. You're rising. Maybe today you needed this reminder. Just because someone never admits the harm doesn't mean it wasn't real. Just because they pretend to feel nothing doesn't mean they don't carry guilt like a shadow. But your healing, it's not on pause until they awaken. It's yours. It always was. So breathe. Let them carry their own weight. And you carry your worth, your dignity, your future. The guilt might be eating away at their mind, but it doesn't get to keep eating away at your peace.